On this prequel episode, we've got Return of the King follow-up polls. We're learning about stop-motion animation and previewing Fantastic Mr. Fox. Well, welcome back to This Film Is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We finished. It's over. It's done, as we said. Lord of the Rings last week. And we have some opinions from our viewers. Listeners, not viewers. I'm used to saying viewers because of YouTube, but listeners. So what, Katie, how did the polls shake down?
Unsurprisingly, it went to the movie.
Yes, again. They've all won so far.
Movie got the majority of the vote, both on Twitter and on Facebook. We did get a couple of votes for the book. And I specifically implored again in those polls that if you prefer the book,
we want to know why.
We want to hear from you. And we did get some good feedback on Twitter.
We did. We got good feedback from people who preferred the movie as well.
Yes.
Lots of people, just not to discount those people. But yeah, sorry, continue.
So on Twitter, at Harry Poppins said, I preferred the book just because I had movie fatigue by then. All of them are so long. It is easy to pick up a book at any time, not so easy with a movie. With books, you get to absorb at your own pace. With movies, you have to absorb at the pace that's designated to you.
That's a true fact.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
We got a counterpoint, not a counterpoint, but sort of the opposite point from somebody saying that they think it's a lot easier because it's only it's a long, and the movies are long. They're 4 hours each if you watch the extended edition. They're 3 hours if you don't or whatever. But there's somebody, and I think that you might have that comment later, that the movies, are a slog, or the books can be a bit of a slog to get through for some people. And so they prefer the movies because they can see the whole story in, 3 hours or whatever. But you can't stop and start. You can, but doesn't work the way a book does. Yeah,
a book, I think, is a lot more conducive to like stopping and starting and putting it down.
Yeah, because that's how you read books. That's not how you digest movies usually. So yeah, it's an interesting point.
Yeah, and the movies are long. I mean, every one that we watched, we took a break halfway through.
Yeah, they're 4 hour long. Again, the extended editions are 4 hours long, almost all of them. And and the theatrical cuts aren't much shorter. They're like 3 hours long. No. So yeah.
And then also on Twitter, at Shelby Suderman.
Number one fan of this podcast, I would say.
Be careful. Scarface
can be the number one fan of the YouTube show. Shelby Suderman is the number one fan of this show. She reads and watches everything we do, I feel.
That is true. Yeah.
I see tweets from her about how she's reading, and she's always reading whatever our next thing is.
Yeah, whatever we're doing. Reading and watching. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. But she had some... she said that she chose the book this time. Still loved the movie, but picked the book, and she had some specific things that she felt were better about the book. She thought the scene where they found Merry and Pippin at Isengard was better. Because it's not immediately revealed that the Ents are there. So initially it kind of seems like these two little hobbits caused all of this destruction.
Interesting. I didn't read it that way, but that's interesting. To be fair, I knew the Ents did it, so
it's hard to kind of divorce yourself from that.
Yeah.
She said she also preferred the book's version of the Frodo, Sam, Gollum triangle.
I can get that.
Which, when we talked about how it's kind of similar, but the movie takes it in a bit of a different direction, she said that she thought the movie was a little bit melodramatic and that the tension was better earned in the book, with Gollum being a more competent murderer and the extended payoff for Sam. And she also preferred the gradual ending of the book, which I would argue that the movie also has a gradual
That's one of the things that I said the movie nailed, is that very gradual denouement that it does of several endings and wrapping all the storylines up.
But she did also specifically
the Scouring of the Shire,
which I also would love to see in movie form.
Make that standalone.
Yeah.
That's the standalone.
No, totally. Screw The Hobbit.
Yeah.
We should have never made The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Hot take. Probably not that hot of a take.
They could have made it. They just could have made it way wrong. If you want to know how they made it way wrong, look up Lindsay Ellis's 3-part series on The Hobbit and why it was such a massive failure, because it's great, and she explores it.
No, The Hobbit could have been one movie.
Yeah.
And The Scouring of the Shire could have been also one movie.
Yeah.
But. So that was on Twitter. Over on Facebook, we didn't really get anybody who had chosen the book over the movie. No. But we got
100% movie votes.
Yes. We got a couple of good comments about the movie. Alexandra said, both the books and the movies will always hold a special place in my heart, but if you had to twist my arm, I'd ultimately pick the movies. And kind of cited like the score, sets, editing, acting, with so much of it being like spot on.
Yeah.
But she said the score was what really puts it over the top.
And I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah. And then Joanna, I'm about to reveal your secret, Joanna. Joanna said, don't tell anyone, but I only read 3/4 of this book. Yeah, so she said basically never really attempted to reread any of the Lord of the Rings books, but have seen all 3 movies and the extended editions multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Jennifer had kind of a similar comment where she said, for me, it comes down simply to this. I will happily rewatch the films often and anytime, but will only begrudgingly reread the books.
Yep.
And I think I feel similarly about that.
If you had to ask me, hey, do you think you'll ever reread these 3 books? I wouldn't say no, for sure not, but probably not.
I would honestly probably say for sure no.
Yeah, I would say probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. I would, again, I think, because eventually we'll do The Hobbit, probably. But, so I'm definitely more likely to reread The Hobbit. I've always enjoyed that one more reading it. But, yeah, I would doubt that I would reread
The Hobbit is lighter fare.
Whereas if you ask me at the end of Harry Potter, will I ever reread Harry Potter again? The answer would be probably yes, at least once or twice over the course of the rest of my life.
But, something like Lord of the Rings, where they are really great, and I totally appreciate them for what they are and for what they've done, especially for the fantasy genre. They're not always fun to read.
No.
And there's just so much more out there that I don't feel like I need to spend another X number of months rereading the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yep, I agree. So thank you, everybody, for all of your input. That was fantastic. The book won out on all of our polls, as it did in our...
the movie.
Sorry, the movie won out. I don't know why I said book. The movie won out in all of our polls, as it did with us. But we had some defenders of the books in there, which was nice to see. So thank you for all of that. And again, if you want to participate, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Facebook and Twitter are where we do the polls and where we read the comments from primarily, but you can get to those through our Instagram and that sort of thing if you need to. So that's that part. Let's move on. We have a learning thing segment, and since we're doing Fantastic Mr. Fox, we're going to learn about stop motion animation.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
All right, so stop motion animation, and a lot of this information is from Wikipedia. Turns out Wikipedia is a pretty good source, especially for stuff like this that's like not controversial. Stop motion is an animated filmmaking technique where objects are physically manipulated in small increments between individually photographed frames so that they appear to move independently when the frames are played back quickly. So basically, in case you don't know how film works in general, a quick rundown of just how film works, how movies work. And now it's different and it changes when you get into digital and stuff, but it's still similar, still very similar. The way a film camera works is it's taking traditionally 24 pictures per second. So everything, when you're watching a movie, you're seeing every single second of film that you're seeing is 24 pictures stitched together, run back to back to back. That creates the relatively seamless illusion of a moving picture.
Right.
Stop motion is the exact same thing. You're doing the exact same thing, although it's almost always done with a still photo or still camera, because you're taking individual still pictures, which is kind of what a video camera is doing, but it just automatically stitches it all together for you. Whereas a regular camera, you can do the exact same thing, but you then would have to stitch them all together yourself in a time. You can do, again, it's possible. It's just way more time consuming.
So film is like, if you have ever seen like a flip book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then what stop motion is that every time in between a picture, you take whatever puppet or whatever thing you're using, and we'll talk about some of the different types of stop motion there are later. You move whatever that thing is a little bit, and then you take another picture of it, and then you move it a little bit, and then you take another picture of it, and then by the time you're done, and you put all those pictures together at whatever speed you want them, and we'll talk about what speed Fantastic Mr. Fox uses, because it's not your traditional 24 frames per second, which is what traditional film is. A lot of TV is 30 frames. Certain things are 60 frames if you want higher, quicker, because your eyes can see much higher than 24 frames a second, and it's actually what gives film its kind of distinctive look that's different from television and other like high definition sports and that sort of thing. It's very complicated. Look up frame rates. I think Captain Dissolution has a really good, he's a YouTuber, like a skeptical YouTuber who does like, in his day job as a videographer kind of guy. And he had a really good video that I think he put out about frame rates. If you want to learn more about it, you can go look at that. But all that being said, that's how stop motion kind of generally works.
So an ungodly amount of work.
It's an ungodly amount of work. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The first instance of stop motion being used is credited to Albert E. Smith and J. Stuart Blackton in 1897 for a film called The Humpty Dumpty Circus. I believe it's a short film in which a toy circus of acrobats and animals comes to life. There's an image of this set and the characters, but I could not find any existing video of the short film, nor did it's not on YouTube. And I looked around, and the one thing I found said that all we had was this image of it. Like, and it may just be somebody took a picture of the stuff that they used in it, but the actual film itself is lost.
Didn't survive.
Yeah. But that was supposedly the first one. Stop motion really came into its own after the turn of the century, though. Some prominent users of it, we're going to kind of run down here. French filmmaker / magician and star of this podcast, Georges Méliès, got a hold of stop motion, and he used it primarily in a number of his special effects in his film. If you've seen the movie Hugo, which we have a quote from, that the character that you're hearing in that moment, where he says happy endings only happen in the movies, that is Georges Méliès in the film, who is a filmmaker. His most famous film that most people have seen probably is Voyage to the Moon or something like that. It's in French. I can't remember. Something Voyage de la Luna or something like that. Voyage of the Moon.
Is that the one where the rocket runs into them? Oh, man. Wow.
Yes. So he was a magician, kind of like a stage magician, and he combined stage magic with film to create these very fantastical short films. And a lot of his special effects he accomplished using stop motion. Other ones are just like magic gags and that kind of, all kinds of stuff like that. But that was one of the things he did. Russian-born, but ethnically Polish director Vladislav, I believe would be Vladislav Starowicz. It's W's, but I believe those are V's in like Polish, maybe. Anyways, Vladislav Starowicz, maybe, who was born in 1892 and died in 1965, started to create stop-motion films using dead insects with wire limbs. Later in France, in his career, he used complex and really impressive puppets. His early works included The Beautiful Lucanida in 1910, The Battle of the Stag Beetles in 1910, and The Ant and the Grasshopper in 1911, the last of which you can find on YouTube. I found it. It's wild. His movies are really weird because they're just dead bugs, but they're stop-motion dead bugs. It's kind of cool. Like, they don't look as creepy as you would maybe imagine. But I watched a little bit of The Ant and the Grasshopper, and it's interesting. So you can go check that out on YouTube if you want. You would have to search The Ant and the Grasshopper with the guy's name, which is like Vladislav. Again, good luck. We'll maybe post a link to it on our social media.
So this is all on Wikipedia, though. So if you
if you went to stop motion, the Wikipedia article for stop motion, you could also find all this stuff. I didn't go anywhere else for any of this information. I went around and did some extra research on top of it, but I didn't pull any of these facts from anywhere else. So, one of the earliest clay animation films was Modeling Extraordinary in 1912, and claymation, as it's now known, became probably maybe the most prominent version of stop motion that we see in a lot of films. Although we'll talk about it; it's more complicated than that. Willie O'Brien pioneered the use of stop motion filmmaking in Hollywood for big budget films in the early 1900s, including The Lost World and probably most famously King Kong in 1933, which the ape is stop motion and I believe clay. Which brings us to Ray Harryhausen, a name that probably a lot of people are familiar with. He was O'Brien's protege, eventual successor in Hollywood, and he created the effects for some of my favorite childhood movies. Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans are two kind of classic fantasy adventure movies, and they both utilize stop motion. In Jason and the Argonauts, I think it's primarily there's a couple different, I don't remember which stories are which, but there's the skeletons are stop motion. There's like stop motion clay skeletons in one of them. Medusa's head in one of them. All the snakes are like a stop motion animated snakes on her head and stuff that are really cool looking. Have you never seen either of those?
No.
Oh boy, we're watching one of those.
I'm just looking at you blankly.
Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans from like the 1980s, 70s. I can't remember the exact decade. I watched those a ton as a kid because my dad loved them, and they're fun. They're like just adventure, action, and fantasy movies. But yeah, they use a lot of stop motion, and they're like the traditional like Greek stories. So here are some of the types of stop motion, and these all aren't necessarily distinct, but the first one, cutout animation. This utilizes flat material like paper cutouts, fabric, photographs to produce 2D animations. Maybe the most prominent example that in modern day that people would recognize of this style is South Park, which eventually it became digital. So like they did it on computers, but I think initially I know initially it was paper cutouts that they used to create this effect. And then they developed software to do it, digitally, but it's still the same style. Second type would be clay animation, which utilizes clay figures. Some examples of this are most of them. And when you think of like full stop motion movies, so Chicken Run, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Coraline, Paranorman, Mary and Max, which is a fantastic movie. If you've never seen Mary and Max, go watch Mary and Max. It used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it still is, but it's so good. I laughed and cried so many times in that film. Maybe one of the like most underrated films I've seen in the last 20 years. Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, bunch of others. All of those claymation. Stereoscopic stop motion, and this is stereoscopic. Basically, just means you're using two cameras to create a 3D effect. Stereo, when you think of like a stereo in your car, like stereo sound is sound in two channels, left and right. Stereoscopic camera or in video is where you're using two cameras. You're filming with two cameras at the same time to create a depth to the image that you can't produce with one camera. A lot of 3D they do kind of in a post effect, but if you want really true like good looking 3D, they do it stereoscopically with two cameras. And the first all stop motion 3D feature was actually Coraline, which we watched. We didn't watch it in 3D. And then Paranorman is also 3D stop motion. And finally, Go Motion, and I'm sure there are other types of stop motion, but finally, Go Motion. This is a complicated version of stop motion. It was developed by Phil Tippett, famously of Industrial Light and Magic and DreamWorks. This involves using a computer program to move parts of the model slightly during each picture, as well as having hand manipulating the model in between the pictures. So think about traditionally in stop motion, I'm explaining it. And traditionally in stop motion, you take a picture, you move the thing, you take a picture, you move the thing, you take a picture, you move the thing. The technology he created is you take a picture, you move the thing, you take a picture, and while you're taking the picture, a computer also moves the thing very slightly during the picture. And then you move it some more after the picture, and then you take the picture and it moves it during the picture, so that you get this motion blurring effect to it that looks more realistic than just the traditional, because traditional stop motion can be a little choppy. And I think this is kind of an attempt to get rid of that choppiness that's in stop motion by having it move during the picture. At least that's what it seems like. Some famous examples of this. It was first used in The Empire Strikes Back. So
now I don't know if this is an example of this or not, but Phil Tippett, that's Jurassic Park guy, right?
Yeah. Okay. I believe they used Go Motion on. We talked about this in Jurassic Park.
Yes,
I talked about Go Motion, and I don't remember what we talked about it. No, they didn't use it. Remember, they were going to.
Yes,
they were going to use it,
right.
But they ended up going with CG, a combination of full-on computer CG and the models.
Yes, I now remember.
Because they originally talked about that they were originally planned on using some form of Go Motion, but they did use it in, I believe they used it in Empire Strikes Back. I believe like the AT-ATs and stuff like that. I'm also fairly certain they used it in Back to the Future. I'm pretty sure, but we can talk about that. So those are like four of the kind of main types of stop motion. Some famous instances of stop motion to talk about. As we mentioned, King Kong 1933, Jason and the Argonauts, Clash of the Titans, the Rankin Bass Christmas movies all use that.
Yeah, so
Rudolph, Frosty.
Not Frosty. Frosty is traditional animation.
Sorry, not Frosty. Yes. Rudolph.
Year Without a Santa Claus.
Yes.
Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Yeah. All of those. Terminator. For some of the special effects, RoboCop, very famously that one scene where it murders everybody. I can't remember. Or not RoboCop, but the other robot before him. It's been forever since I've seen RoboCop. But that's stop motion. Coraline and all of Laika's work, including Paranorman, The Box Trolls, Kubo and the Two Strings, and their most recent movie, Missing Link or something like that, which I haven't seen. I want to see, but because all the other movies have been great, but we haven't seen the new one. Star Wars, all of the movies, Back to the Future, Nightmare Before Christmas. So very few, or at least not a ton of movies, are entirely stop motion. Again, you can probably name most of those, and I've named most of them over the course of this. But for decades, stop motion was one of the primary ways of producing special effects, and thus it was pretty ubiquitous. So there's lots of movies where stop motion was used. The car flying in Back to the Future at different times is very often stop motion or some form of stop motion or go motion. The AT-ATs walking in Star Wars a lot of time are stop motion and that sort of thing. So a lot of movies used it because it was a way to animate things before you could use a computer to animate things. And then as we moved away from that and got into computer animation, you didn't need to use stop motion as much anymore. So it was everywhere for a long time. And there's lots of movies you can go back and look at and go, holy cow, that you didn't maybe even realize that was stop motion. Because when it's done really well, it's not super noticeable. But there are some movies that are entirely stop motion and it gives you a very distinct look. Oh, and the other probably most famous instance of stop motion is Ben Wyatt's short film. I can't remember what it's called. Shoot.
It's the
but the song is Stand in the Place Where You Are.
REM song.
Yeah, the REM song. It's called like Monday Morning or something. I can't remember. But anyways, look up Parks and Rec stop motion movie. That's a great little scene. Anyways. That'll explain how hard it is to do stop motion. As it took him, he worked on it for weeks and gets about 4 seconds of a movie. So, my last question and the last part of this is, what's your favorite full stop motion movie, Katie? If you had to pick a full stop motion movie, we've seen quite a few of them.
Yeah.
What do you think's your favorite one?
I really liked Kubo and the Two Strings.
That's probably mine.
When we went and saw that.
Well, yeah.
I also have kind of a soft spot for Corpse Bride. Actually.
Yeah, Corpse Bride's good.
Yeah.
I think my favorite is either Kubo and the Two Strings, which I thought was incredible, and there's a whole nother level of complexity to that that is even not in some of the other movies. But Mary and Max is truly fantastic, and I haven't watched it in a while. We should watch it.
Yeah.
Because again, it used to be on Netflix. I watched it probably close to 10 years ago now, but I loved it. And so that one may be up there, but Kubo is super duper good.
Oh, and my favorite Rankin Bass Christmas movie is definitely The Year Without a Santa Claus.
I'm aware. I've watched it every Christmas with you for the past 4 years. It's fine.
Hey.
Sorry, Jenna. Anyways, that's all we had for learning things with This Film Is Lit. But yeah, go ahead and send us a comment or tweet or something. Tell us what your favorite full stop motion movie is. Or if it's one, especially if it's one we haven't mentioned. If it's something we aren't aware of. Maybe it's Fantastic Mr. Fox. Speaking of, let's find out a little bit about Fantastic Mr. Fox with the book facts.
And so it begins.
Welcome to the fantastic world of Mr. Fox.
Woo! Should we dance?
Woo! His life is fantastic.
Pure wild animal craziness.
His wife is fantastic.
If what I think is happening, it better not be.
His neighbors, not so fantastic.
All right, I've got a couple of book facts, not a ton. You don't have a ton of movie facts either, though. So Fantastic Mr. Fox, a children's novel written by British author Roald Dahl. This is our third Roald Dahl book movie adaptation that we've done. It was originally published in 1970. The first paperback in 1974 featured illustrations by Jill Bennett. Later editions had illustrations by Tony Ross, and then the iconic Quentin Blake who did all of Roald Dahl's later editions.
Yep.
In 1994, Fantastic Mr. Fox was awarded the Read Aloud Bilby Award from the Children's Book Council of Australia. In addition to being adapted into this film that we're going to talk about, it has also been adapted for the stage 3 times, once as a straight play, once as a musical, and once as
a queer play?
Opera.
Oh.
What?
I was hoping they did the straight play. Let's do the queer version.
Okay, a straight play, for anyone who doesn't know, is a play that doesn't have music in it. It's just the opposite of a musical.
Just being facetious.
I know. So a little bit about the background of how this book came to be. So Roald Dahl lived with his family in Great Missenden, I guess is how you say that, which is a village in Buckinghamshire. And
very British name.
I know, right? And their house was surrounded by like wooded area and fields, very like British countryside, I would have to imagine. And there was one particular tree.
Very the Shire.
Yes. There was one particular tree that was known locally as the witch's tree, that sat on a lane near their house. A lane that is also very British countryside. And supposedly that tree came to inspire this story, which was also supposedly one of his favorites. So what the witch tree was a large 150-year-old beech tree, which is sadly no longer standing. But the story goes that when his children were growing up, he would tell them that that was where Mr. Fox and his family lived, in a hole just beneath the trunk, which is where they live in this story.
Cool. Those are some little bit of background on Fantastic Mr. Fox, the book. Let's talk about the movie.
Ignore incredible.
I can fit through there. You wanna know why? Why? Because I'm little.
It's all about fantastic.
You really are fantastic.
I try.
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
What's this lightning bolt?
This fence might be electric.
Well, I just hope it doesn't mean thunder, because I have a phobia of that.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is a 2009 film written and directed by Wes Anderson. It stars a laundry list of people. George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, Michael Gambon, Willem Dafoe, Owen Wilson, Karen Duffy, and more.
Will we ever escape Harry Potter?
No. No. Wait, was it Michael Gambon? I might have wrote that down wrong.
It was Michael Gambon.
Okay, yes. Yeah. For some reason, I was thinking it was Michael Caine in my head just now, but yeah, Michael Gambon. Yeah. And a lot of those are traditionally a fair number of those are actors that Mr. Wes Anderson uses quite often. Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray being two of and Owen Wilson in everything he does. Joe Roth and Revolution Studios bought the film rights for Fantastic Mr. Fox in 2004. And then Wes Anderson signed on a couple years later. He signed on as director with Henry Selick, who worked on The Life Aquatic with him, as the animation director. Anderson stated that he signed on because Roald Dahl was one of his heroes. Originally, Cate Blanchett was to voice Mr. Fox, but she left the role for undisclosed reasons. Not sure what that was. But it would have been her again. We would have had Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. So Henry Selick left the project.
And now Henry Selick, he, I believe, directed The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes. And I believe he directed Coraline, potentially. But he left the movie to work on Coraline in February 2006, and they replaced him with a new animation director. Wes Anderson chose to record many of the voices outside rather than in a studio. We went out in a forest, we went in an attic, and we went into a stable. We went underground for some things. This was a great spontaneity. There was a great spontaneity in the recordings because of that. And the voices were recorded before any of the animation was done, which is not always the case. Sometimes there's like a loose animation done, but I guess with stop motion it's probably different. But like a lot of times in animated movies, they'll do some animation and then have them voice with it. It depends, but it's interesting. So Great Missenden, as you said, in Buckinghamshire, Fordville, upon Stratford von Avon, or whatever, where Roald Dahl lived, was the major influence for the look of the film, which makes sense because it was a major influence.
The stuff that I added to the bottom of your notes is about that.
Okay, well,
because it was on his website.
There you go. Henry Selick, who kept in contact with Anderson throughout the course of the film, said the director would act out scenes while he was in Paris, and then he would record them on his iPhone and send them to the animators so that they could animate the scenes. He would go, I want it like this, and he would act it out and send it to him. CGI, so this movie, like we said, is stop motion, which means it's a bunch of miniature sets and clay figures and different puppets and that sort of thing. And the sets are amazing looking when you look at the behind the scenes footage and stuff, which stop motion picture movies, whenever you look at the behind the scenes stuff, is the most mind blowing, cool thing ever. And you see them when you watch Leica's films, a lot of times during the credits, they'll show you them doing a scene or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's freaking nuts, but it's really cool. But so this movie only uses CGI in one scene. Now, there may be other arguable elements of CGI and stuff, but supposedly the only CGI they used was in the flooding scene in the Flint mine, which I don't know what that is or what that, but so this movie was shot digitally using a Nikon D3. It offers significantly higher resolution than that of a full high definition video camera. Probably at the time, I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore, but especially not of the Nikon D3. But it was a still camera, which again, when you're shooting stop motion, is what you want to use generally. It was also, and this is what's interesting, it was shot at a frame rate of 12 frames per second rather than the typical 24, which is what most movies are. And apparently this was so that viewers would notice the stop motion more. So that it would look even choppier than your traditional movie.
So it's a style
choice to just make the stop motion animation even more. It's obviously going to be apparent, but to just kind of to bring that out even more, because again, it's already kind of choppy by the nature of the medium, and by dropping the frame rate even more, it also brings it more in line with an actual picture book, because you're seeing each frame longer than you would traditionally, so you get more time to look at every frame. And the movie is composed in its entirety of almost 56,000 shots, so it's quite a few. So
it's 56,000 individual pictures.
Yeah, which is 12. Let's see here. 56,000 divided by 12 is 4,666 seconds, which is 4666 divided by 60 is 77 minutes. So
there you go.
It's probably in that ballpark. Yeah. Right, yeah. During the making of the film version of Fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson returned to Great Missenden, which we mentioned earlier, and he stayed with Roald Dahl's widow, Felicity Lissy Dahl, who we talked about in previous prequel episodes, I believe.
Yeah, I think we did.
When we did Charlie and Chocolate Factory, while he wrote the screenplay. Much of the film's art direction was inspired by the house and garden where Roald Dahl had lived, and many of the scenes you will see in the finished film are based on places in the area, including the local pub, the Nag's Head, previously frequented by Roald Dahl himself. So there you go. Those are your book or movie facts. I've never seen this film, Katie. I'm excited.
I know I've seen it. I have zero memories of it.
There you go.
So
Wes Anderson has his things, but Wes Anderson's so white. But I do enjoy most of his movies that I've seen. There's a funness to them. Moonrise Kingdom I thought was quite good. I like a lot of his movies. But anyways, so I'm excited to watch this one. I've never seen it, and it should be fun. Do we know where it is? Is it available anywhere? Have we looked?
I think it might be on Netflix.
I think you might be right. That sounds correct to me.
I feel like I've seen it recommended
Fantastic
to me.
Mr. Fox. It is... Oh, it didn't show up. It probably is. I don't know. I thought it might show up in the thing. I don't know. Check out Netflix. It might be on there. If not, then sorry.
If not, then maybe you could go and patronize your local library.
Yeah, patronize your local library, because they would like to see your beautiful face. All right, and that's going to do it for this episode. Until next time, you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so Goodreads, Reddit, all those good places. Leave us a rating, review on iTunes or anywhere else you download and listen to our great podcast. recommend this around. It's always nice. It's always good. It's always helpful. So yeah, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.